Welcome to another episode of SUMA Observations and Conversations, a podcast by Southern Utah Museum of Art, where we talk to artists, curators, art historians, and staff about what's happening at SUMA. I'm Emily Ronquillo, Director of Marketing and Design, and your host for the podcast. In this episode, our Executive Director, Jessica Kinsey, and I sit down with the new Dean of the College of Performing and Visual Arts, Michael Schmidt. Before joining us here at SUU, he was the interim dean of the College of the Arts at Valdosta State University, where he taught ceramics and foundations for more than 12 years. Michael and Jessica discuss how campus museums can be a valuable resource for students, faculty, and the community by providing opportunities for interdisciplinary learning and creating a welcoming space for all. They also touch on the ways a museum can introduce people to new conversations, how museums create family-friendly experiences, and why you should visit SUMA. I hope you enjoy this introduction to our new dean and learn something new about campus museums. So with me today, I have Jessica Kinsey and Dean Michael Schmidt to the podcast. So welcome back, Jessica, SUMA's Executive Director. And if you're a regular listener, you'll recognize Jessica. She's been here from the beginning, getting us started, and she's been working in academic museums for 15 years. So we're happy to have her.
Thanks for having me.
Great. And welcome, first time to the podcast, Dean Michael Schmidt, who is the new dean for CPVA. It's been about 6-7 months now, right?
Yeah, time flies.
Yeah, so we're happy to have you here. And can you just kind of give our listeners, tell us a little bit more about yourself as an artist, your career in higher education?
Sure, I'll give you the quick version of that. So my background is actually in graphic design and art history, terminal degree in ceramics and sculpture with a minor in painting. So as a visual artist, I have a really diverse background in the arts. Found my way into being an administrator in the arts early in my career at another institution, department head and then associate dean, interim dean. And when I found myself here at SUU, I'd spent a lot of time in Utah over the years, and I was really enamored by the position and all that's attached to the arts with a capital A here. So I was really excited to apply and then get the job offer to come here. But thrilled to be a visual artist representing all of the arts here at SUU and at SUMA as well.
Yeah, we're lucky to have you.
Yeah, we're lucky to have you at SU. We're lucky to have you on the podcast and at SUMA. And I think that's a great kind of segue into our topic today. We're talking about campus museums, why they matter, why they're important. So to get us started, Jessica, can you tell us a little bit more about the history of just academic museums in general?
Yeah, I actually, when I was at the University of Oklahoma, a colleague of mine, Melissa Ski, we were both kind of looking into the history and uniqueness of campus museums. And so she was doing some research when we were together, and she found that the first academic museum was established in 1831 at Yale University. And I think a lot of these museums across the country on campuses, they started because donors wanted to give works of art to the university, to the college, and they started to build these collections before they actually had the institutions to house them. So I feel like that's certainly true for SUMA. That's certainly true for SUMA and Southern Utah University, that the college was receiving works of art long before there was a place to house them, because the Braithwaite Gallery didn't open until the late 70s. So I think that's true of lots of other institutions. Sorry. And then I think they really started to develop into these campus resources for teaching, for research, for scholarship. And then if you think about communities that don't have municipal museums, then those communities often turn to their campus and their colleges for those museums and those experiences. And that's really contributed to the growth across the country. And then I just was looking, the Association of Academic Museums and Galleries, or AAMG, is currently conducting a census to see actually how many college campus museums, galleries exist on college campuses in the U.S., but right now it's estimated to be about 650, with the majority of those being art museums. So there are natural history and other collections on campuses, but the majority of them are art museums. Wow. And then, for me personally, this is all I know. I've only ever worked in academic museums. And January 2025 marks 15 years since I began my academic museum career. So here we are. Crazy.
That's crazy. 15 years.
Yep.
It goes by quick.
Yeah.
It does. In the blink of an eye.
Yeah. So I guess, Michael, kind of like from your higher ed perspective, what makes academic museums unique?
Well, I want to focus specifically on SUMA and how I feel really passionate about this place and this space. So first of all, just kudos to the administration, the community, the leadership at SUU's campus for having vision to create a museum of this caliber in our community, in the southwest of portion of Utah, which is rural. So to have a museum, a space, an architectural icon of this caliber is mind-blowing, really. I mean, it's hard to believe. So for me, the mission and purpose of a university museum, coupled with our strategic plan of people, purpose, and place, you've got things that center around fostering education, cultural enrichment, community engagement. We're probably going to talk about these things throughout the podcast. Serving as a vital resource that connects the academic goals of the institution to the broader public, and connecting with outreach, connecting with our K-12 partners in the community, just fostering a real wonderful access point for the arts with a capital A. And you have preservation and stewardship, research, public engagement. All of those things are just really, really vital parts of a museum, and especially an academic museum, part of the institution. And then on top of that, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, just having an architecture firm, Brooks and Scarpa, that is award-winning, and then this iconic building that ties architecture to the place of southern Utah and pays homage to the canyons, the slot canyons of the art of the area here in southern Utah. It's really just a gem. I mean, as an outsider coming from Georgia, it blew my mind. And I hope that the community really understands how lucky they are to have the Southern Utah Museum of Art here locally.
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
I've been here almost 8 years, which is also crazy to think about. But I think the longer that I've been here, I have realized it really is a miracle. Not just that this museum exists, but the way in which it exists, the architecture and the location. It's just not only for a small regional university, but for a rural, remote community. It just blows my mind. And it did then, but I think the longer I've been here, the more I just realize, wow, this is really incredible that this exists, and that not only the campus supported it, but I would say even maybe more importantly, the community supported it.
Totally.
Yeah, I think that's something I'm hoping to dive deeper on in another episode, kind of about our recent brand refresh project and kind of how that came to be, and what we were doing with trying to demonstrate visually how SUMA is this intersection between campus and community. I think, Jessica, like you've kind of mentioned about how this is not only serving campus, but our larger community as well. And so I think that is something that helps make SUMA unique. And it's great that we're able to do what we do, It's a wide audience. I want to sidebar just a little bit because, Michael, you've said a couple times arts with a capital A. So can you define that for our listeners?
Sure.
Real quick, so they know what you're talking about.
Yeah, of course. So when I say arts with a capital A, I'm talking about the bigger picture of all of the arts. So obviously, SUMA largely revolves around visual art, but we also partner with, like, I'm thinking of the book club that we had here just a couple.
The Southern Utah Book Festival.
Yeah, and we had presentations here. So arts with a capital A includes film, visual art, theater, dance,
literary.
All of the arts, which I think are really, really the cornerstone of education across all of the arts. So obviously SUMA is a piece of that puzzle, and a very important piece of that puzzle of arts with a capital A.
Yeah,
I hope
great.
that helps.
Thanks. I just want to make sure everyone knows what we're talking about
Sure.
when we're talking about that, because it is easy when, especially coming from an art museum, that we're just visual arts all the time. But spoiler alert, we're not.
Yeah, we're a lot more than that.
So yes, I think kind of talking now about SUMA's role on our campus. I think that, one thing about academic museums is they're at universities, colleges, and that's that thing that ties us together. So how does SUMA contribute to the university's mission and strategic plan? I feel like you touched on this a little bit, but
sure.
Can we dive deeper into how SUMA is helping propel the university forward?
Absolutely. I think all of that, for me, centers around education and stewardship. So you have the institution and the museum in a partnership, right, that provides resources for teaching and learning, experiential learning opportunities, interdisciplinary exploration, promotion of critical thinking, creativity, and cultural understanding, research, with faculty members using SUMA as a resource to further their own special research projects and collaborative projects. You have ways of advancing knowledge in various fields that SUMA is trying to touch on, like our current exhibition of salt lines. You have conservation efforts, public engagement, which of course couples with people, place, and purpose, which is the institution's strategic plan. So there's a lot of really great ways, integration into the curriculum, both in the community coming in for education and also students on campus, both in the arts and across many disciplines throughout the institution. And just in trying to, engage with a very diverse audience range through exhibitions, lectures, workshops, community programming, connections with board membership and people who have vested interest in the community within the arts. So SUMA is really at the cornerstone of all of that. It's really important.
Yeah, I think that's a great kind of broad and expansive overview.
Yeah.
And so, Jessica, I want to kind of ask you about what does that look like in SUMA's day-to-day? These experiential learning opportunities, research, and even just we employ, if you're a regular listener of the podcast, we employ a lot of students on our staff. So what is SUMA doing to support those students and their professional development as they're getting ready to graduate?
Yeah. And I think that, people may not be aware how many students actually work in the museum. So I was just looking, 59% of our staff are made up of student positions. And I think that that is pretty remarkable on a couple of levels. Number one, obviously giving students these experiences. But number two, we would not be able to fulfill our work or our mission without their help and support. So I think that that's a big deal. But, before I get into the kind of breakdown of what those student positions look like, it's certainly beyond having a job here, right? That there are opportunities to not only go to conferences, but present at conferences. Right. So thinking about professional development, that we want to open those doors for students while they're students. And I think that's what really drew me originally to come, to even apply for the job at SUMA, because 15 years ago, I was an undergrad student employee working as tour coordinator, and I just felt like the academic institution that I was in did not invest in me until I was a full-time employee. And so when I came in here, I felt it was really important to give those experiences to students while they were students. So whether that's going to a conference or having opportunities to work with budgets and, just things that, again, you don't necessarily think of really getting that until you're full-time. So that's been a big motivator for me. And like I said, these positions are really critical to what we do. Right now, we have a really great partnership with the Arts Administration program here at Southern Utah University. So we currently have 3 graduate students who are pursuing an MFA in arts admin that work here through their assistantships. In the past, we've had up to 6 graduate students working in the museum. And so some of those areas, they have quite a range from collections, marketing, development, working with K-12 or public programming, and then even visitor experience. And then the other thing I want to point out, because I feel like in my conversations with colleagues around the country in academic museums, this is pretty unique, that we've been able to partner with the SUU Department of Filmmaking, Art, and Design to offer paid internships and those opportunities to work at SUMA, and that they've worked in curatorial, they've worked in graphic design, and again, kind of education programming. And I just feel like in these conversations with colleagues, they can't believe that we're able to find these types of paid opportunities. And I feel like that maybe is unique to SUU, that I feel like the department has funding for student positions, but not always the opportunities. And that's where SUMA has been able to partner and provide the opportunity, but we haven't had the funding to offer a paid experience, through an internship. So I just feel like they're really unique to what we can do on a campus that has a mission of experiential learning, and then the museum just works hard to perpetuate that mission and extend learning outside of the classroom.
Yeah, and if I can add to that too, I've been really impressed in the several months I've been here with just the quality of the student work and the student workers that are across departments and in SUMA working. It really is unique. I've been in higher ed for a while, and I think at SUU we utilize students in a really positive and robust way that I think is pretty unique to this institution. And so that's an added bonus to what the students are learning throughout their jobs and internships across the campus and through SUMA as well. I think it's been fantastic.
Yeah, I didn't have that opportunity at SUMA, but when I was in undergrad and grad school here at SUU, just having that campus job and being trusted to do real work and not just
make copies.
Yeah, make copies and get coffees. What I kind of said, I think my supervisors, mentors, professors, really invested in giving real world experience. I was able to go to different conferences, whether I was presenting or not, just to kind of get those other opportunities. And so it does feel something unique to SUU and just kind of the culture that we have here around students and building those relationships. And I know that I wouldn't be here if I hadn't had those opportunities when I was studying, because I don't know what I'd be doing. I think I'd be managing a Starbucks. Really, I'd have a bachelor's degree and I'd be like a general manager at a coffee shop or something without getting involved, building those connections, getting that experience outside of the classroom.
Yeah. And I think when I was at the University of Oklahoma, I had to sort of carve that out for myself. And I was just lucky enough to get a student position at the museum. And so here it's been really important that students don't have to create that space for themselves, that it is supported broadly across campus and it's built into the work that we do at SUU.
Yeah, it shows the evidence of SUU pouring into supporting, developing students, and also empowering them, right, to rise up and take initiative and be leaders as well. I think that's pretty unique here.
Well, and I feel like we hear from several alumni who have worked at the museum and gone on to get other jobs in museums or, arts organizations. And they always have some interesting feedback of, I miss SUMA.
I hear that a lot.
Great.
I miss SUMA, even just students that have graduated 4 or 5 years ago. Can I still use you as a reference?
Yeah.
Or I don't even want to talk about this other experience I have. I'm not putting that on my resume. I want my, but my time at SUMA was really important to me and that development. And so that's always great to hear. And I think one of the things for me that I really love about this job and this position, working in higher ed, that it's nice to be able to be like part of the arts, at the museum and leading the marketing, doing these fun things like this podcast. But I think it really is the student mentorship and just being able to watch them develop and grow. And I think show them, healthy workplace practices so they can go on into the world. I think we spoil them a little bit, but in a good way, that I hope that there's ripple effects in the long run, that they're able to change their future workplaces because of their time at SUMA.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You said spoil them, but I would say, I might argue or assert or advocate that it's setting the bar. You all have done a great job in leadership in setting a really high standard, helping students reach that and exceed it. So I think that's something you do really well here.
Yeah. Well, and I think, another example of that is even performance reviews. Again, these things that I never got a performance review as a student employee. But I think it's such an important experience, and that we have this expectation that they're doing a self-evaluation, and it just, I think, again, is setting them up to either know what to look for when they are applying for jobs or they're interviewing for jobs, or again, when they get into an organization, they know what to ask for and they know what to, sort of create for themselves or their own employees, So I think it's, again, setting the bar very high.
Yeah, I think even that bleeds into our onboarding practices. I think that kind of was born out of this idea of, a lot of just general workplaces have issues with turnover, where we're seeing we know that we have turnover because it's built into our students graduating. Right. We want them to graduate. We know we have them for this limited amount of time. So how am I going to not waste that time? How am I going to make sure that they're ready to go really early on in starting at the museum? So then when they're here for, whether it's a semester, 2 semesters, 2 years, that they're getting the most out of this job, because I know that there's an end date. I'm not waiting for them to just find a new job at some point.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because I think museums and nonprofits in general, there is a lot of turnover. And I think because we've leaned into the fact that we have built-in turnover, that there is an investment up front. And again, we don't want to have to reinvent the wheel every time we have a new employee in a position. And so I think, again, hopefully that is reflected, on the, for the students' experience, that they come in and they really know what's expected of them and what they're going to get out of the job. That I think that has also contributed to these students really sort of missing their time at the museum, at SUMA specifically. Because again, I think we've all been there, where we're thrown into a job and what's onboarding, and, so I think that that's a really good point, that other museums outside of academic institutions really could turn to and learn from, because there is a lot of turnover. That's just the world that we live in. And I think especially as new generations enter the workforce, they just have the world at their fingertips, so they can seek all types of different opportunities and shake things up for themselves. But yeah, I think that's a good point, the onboarding.
Yeah. Great. I think one of the ways that our listeners can view kind of some of the work that students are doing and the research that they're doing on our collections is through our digital kiosk or online. So students mostly have the opportunity to intern and dive into a portion of our collection and learn more about that, curate a mini digital exhibition where they're writing text and finding things out, looking at provenance and how things arrived at the museum. And so I want to kind of talk more about how these opportunities at the museum are either complementing, reflecting the curriculum that they're learning inside the classroom. So can you tell me more about that importance of the museum's role in education outside the classroom, whether it's through that example or others?
Well, I think that's yet another good example of what makes SUMA unique, at least again in my, even if it's somewhat limited experience in academic museums, even just in conversations with colleagues, I feel like we can kind of identify a few academic museums that are doing the work that we're trying to do. But yeah, to be able to be in an undergraduate in art history, and you get to really spend some time with a museum collection and curate these, mini sort of virtual exhibitions. But it's not just that, they're actually contributing to the research. We have one curator, and her time is primarily focused on special exhibitions. So the collections research often takes a back seat. And I think that these undergraduate students have been able to contribute to that research in really meaningful ways. That again, in the classroom, they're learning the theory, they're learning the history, they're learning the skill set for research and for writing. And then they get to come into the museum space and actually apply that in a real way. It's no longer a hypothetical. It's, they're actually contributing research to a museum that will live on beyond their time at SUU. And I think the Catalog It Hub is a great example of that, students graduated several years ago, and their work and their research is still available and will be utilized in the future. That there's other opportunities, whether it's our learning and engagement team who can build resources based off of their research. We have our 10-year anniversary coming up for SUMA, that this research will be utilized by our team. So I think that is one thing that, again, just makes these experiences so important for balancing theory in the classroom and practice in the workspace in a museum.
Yeah, I think if I can add to that, the museum has an incredible kind of privilege and responsibility to facilitate conversation, exchange of ideas. Sometimes that spark that occurs with friction, right? To bring up topics that sometimes have differing opinions, and we invite those opinions and those conversations to take place through an exhibition or through a master class or a visiting artist or a workshop or a connection with the institution and the museum. So like Salt, I'll tip my hat again to Salt Lines. I mean, you're talking about geology, you're talking about history, not only of the American West, but also of what's happening contemporarily with the planet and some of the things that we're talking about politically, all through visual imagery. So there's a great opportunity for the museum and the academic institution to have all these types of conversations and invite a lot of different viewpoints to the table, which then ultimately educates our students and our community, which is a really fantastic opportunity. So I think that's something that this museum does really well.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit more. Jessica, can you tell us more about your process for selecting exhibitions, determining the exhibition schedule? What are you thinking about in relation to how that can be applied to different faculty and disciplines across the university?
Yeah, so I would say that over the past few years, we have cut 2 exhibitions from our rotation, primarily as a way to build capacity for the team. And that, of course, has a rippling effect. It's not just curatorial, it's marketing, it's learning and engagement. But I would say that this has given us the opportunity to have more of an intention in what we're doing. And so what that looks like is that we're able to reach more K-12 and SUU groups during the academic year. Now that we have a fall-winter exhibition that's running from mid-October until early March, roughly, that's giving people enough time to not only find out or learn about the exhibition, but then engage with it. And I think in the past, we would have a show that would open mid-October and it closed at the end of December. So by the time a faculty member maybe heard about it, it was too late to build it into their syllabus. And so I think that's really opened that door, and we've seen a significant, like over 70% increase in SUU tours.
Wow.
Just in the last year. So that's been really exciting. But I would say that we also saw that as a time to ensure, and again, kind of set that intention, that these academic year exhibitions are interdisciplinary in nature or in theme. So a few examples. Last year, Brutal DC, it was art and architecture. This year, Salt Lines, it's art and science. Next year, we'll be featuring the Cedar City Art Exhibition that ran from 1940 to the early 2000s. And that will really be about the intersection between art and history, because it will play into the WPA. So I think that these ways that we can create not just these interdisciplinary opportunities, but I would say that those interdisciplinary opportunities really spark dialogue and conversation across campus.
Great.
All right. So then to follow that up, Michael, how would you encourage faculty to work with the museum, incorporate that into their pedagogy and into their syllabi and their classrooms?
Sure. I think first and foremost that regardless of what we're exhibiting in the museum, there are access points for all sorts of disciplines across the campus. So I would urge, deans, department heads, and their faculty members just to make SUMA a regular stop and to engage with the museum and the staff and all that we have to offer here, because there are so many different ways to engage with what we're exhibiting, and it's changing, as Jessica just said, it's changing routinely, and so they need to keep tabs on that throughout the year. But specifically, I think one of the things that I was really enamored by several months ago when I was visiting here was how the Department of Filmmaking, Art and Design collaborates with the museum, and they have their BFA senior exhibitions here. And I saw the student work on display back in April, the senior work, which was really fantastic. So obviously the faculty members and the department chair, Jeff Hansen, working in close lockstep with the staff here to have a student exhibition within the gallery as part of their capstone experience and their learning, engaging with setting up an entire exhibition, what that looks like, lighting, all the stuff that goes into having an exhibition, which is really fantastic. So that's just one, I think, one way that art and design and filmmaking works with the museum. There's other venues on campus, the Frenner Museum, for example, through the College of Natural Science.
Yes. Yeah.
And I've stopped in there a number of times, and actually we had an art student that was working in there as well. Again, just a wonderful way to engage with an entity that's not necessarily directly related to the arts. So that's why I would encourage people to come over here, our faculty, staff, to come over and just, I think they'll be amazed at the many, many ways that they can engage with the museum across their curriculum.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jessica, do you have any other ways or other ideas from the museum perspective about how faculty, students, and maybe even university staff can engage with the museum?
Yeah, I think beyond the exhibitions, obviously we get a lot of SUU tours who specifically sign up for whatever exhibition. Because again, I mean, really, you can take anything and apply an interdisciplinary lens to it. But I think also our growing collections have been a really good source for faculty, especially in integrating collections into their course curricula. And I did want to just share a few examples from across campus. We've had a typography class come in to look at the Fillmore West rock posters that were collected by Jimmy's brother, Scott Jones. There used to be a course that was co-taught between biology and English called Understanding Nature Through the Humanities, and they would come every fall and even, take a look at the Brett Weston photographs to really sort of examine nature through the humanities. And then the costume design class was coming and was studying the collection of Japanese woodblock prints, specifically to create like costume renderings. And again, I think just back to that theory and applied practice, I think it's really cool that object-based learning can really bring a different perspective or a new perspective to a class, regardless of if it's in the visual arts. You know, that here's an example of science and, you know, biology and English, but also just another department within the College of Performing and Visual Arts who is coming. And we've had dance classes come and respond, I think, more to exhibitions than to collections. But yeah, I just wanted to give a few examples of what faculty are doing when it comes to our collections, because we do have about 2,000 objects that really can lend itself to building these bridges between the visual arts and disciplines across campus. But I think also, you know, beyond all of these things, I feel like we're talking a lot about formal learning, but there's also a lot of just engagement opportunities for faculty and students. And I feel like our SUMA Sidekicks program, which is a free membership for students, is a really great example of a resource on campus that, again, it's not tied to a class, it's not tied to a grade. It's really meant to help students build a sense of community and connect with a campus resource that you don't have to be in CPVA to appreciate or to be exposed to, right? And so I think these more informal opportunities to engage with the museum are probably just as important as formal learning with SUU classes and curriculum. So I think, yeah, what we want to do next is really take a lot of that and apply it more to faculty and staff. Again, because I think we are in a small, rural, remote community. How can the museum facilitate building community, building relationships, having that sense of belonging? I think that there's a lot of opportunity that SUMA has to play that role. And I think especially we wouldn't exist if it weren't for SUU. Yeah. So I think really putting our SUU audience as number one and kind of our target, I think there's a lot we can do on the informal side more for faculty and staff that I think we'll start to see more of in the future.
Can I add just a couple things that popped into my head when you were talking of just, I try to encourage as many people as I possibly can to visit this space and this building. And on top of the formal learning, the informal learning that's going on here, this space is just a really awesome place to come and reflect, think, and spend a little time by yourself or with a small group or maybe with a partner. I come to this museum often. I revisit exhibitions and shows. I'll walk through by myself. And the museum is a beautiful space. And then the work that's presented here is wonderful. And spending time with the work by yourself and just contemplating what it means and how that shapes your ideas over time. I remember coming into the previous exhibition and reading, I spent some time at the back of the museum just reading the comment book and seeing what other people had thought and reflected and then took time to write down. It was awesome. And so it's just it's a really unique space on campus that really invites and allows that self-reflection and thought process, which I think is really great too. It's hard to find those these days.
Yeah. And I think, you know, for SUMA to maybe again in our new strategic plan that we'll be developing, how can we become more of that third space? So I feel like a couple of good examples, the Stillman Sculpture Court, you know, once we really set an intention to that design and that space and added sculpture, it has become that third space for folks. Yeah. And I think also the Sam and Diane Stewart Family Foundation Plaza. Once we added tables, just putting tables on that plaza permanently, I remember someone driving by and sending me a text and saying, "Oh, is there a program or an event happening at the museum?" Like, no. She just saw people at all of those tables. And I've seen, students and faculty sitting out there with their laptops and working. And so I think Salt Lines, because of the Namak Nazar installation with the kind of floor chairs and the benches, has been the first time that there has been kind of this seating area within the museum space. So I think, again, the more we can set intention and develop those spaces, the more I think not only SUU, but the community could start to see SUMA as their third space. Yeah. And what I mean by that is it's not work and it's not home. So it's that third space where you're spending time.
Yeah.
And it's nice you don't have to spend money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Everything's
free.
else.
Yeah. You're not obligated to buy a coffee when you're, coming in here. So, I think, again, just turning to the future, what are some ways that the museum can really better position itself as that third space for the campus and the community?
Cool.
Yeah, I think something that you said, Michael, about just coming here as a place for contemplation and reflection by yourself made me think about SUMA's role in, I think, teaching people how to engage with an art museum. Yeah. Thinking about our community, rural southern Utah, a lot of people may not have an experience with the museum before stepping foot into SUMA. And I think this is also kind of a nod to Jimmy Jones's original vision, who grew up here and wanted a place where you could see kind of world-class art in this region. And so I think expanding beyond campus and into our community, kind of what is that role for the museum?
Yeah, I mean, I have always felt that campus museums, again, what makes them unique is that they are so well positioned to be that intersection between a campus and a community. If you think about it, there are only a few spaces on campus where these two very different communities, sometimes referred to as town and gown, are coming together. That could be athletic events, I think is probably the number one that comes to mind. But then I think specifically to SUU, you think about the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Center for the Arts, and you've got the Utah Shakespeare Festival and the Green Show, where you see these worlds colliding. But then SUMA is that other space where, again, I think sometimes we fall into the trap, and maybe other academic museums do as well, where our community thinks we're only here for campus. And then sometimes campus thinks, well, we're here for the community. And it's like, well, actually, we want to be here for both of you, for everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
And again, that space where you can intersect. And I think that is one of the most important things that the museum brings to both the campus and the community, is that space to come together. And I feel like we've talked about a few of the examples of that, like the Southern Utah Book Festival was a good example of these worlds colliding. But even Dia de los Muertos, where SUMA for 7 years has been hosting an event that was first developed by a professor from Spanish, the Spanish department, Junice Acosta Martinez. And they quickly outgrew the space on campus where they were hosting this event back in 2016, 2017, and then starting in 2018. The museum was able to step in and be that space. And I think that is one of the most successful events under SUMA's umbrella that brings not only the community to campus, but an underrepresented community to campus, and one that is growing in Southern Utah.
Yeah, and my first time at that event this year, I was blown away. I mean, I went to so many events, and there was, thousands of people. Yeah. It was really something all day long, and the weather was a little bit crummy. We had to make some changes in the plans, but it was still a really highly attended event, and wow, the community was really blown away. And I think there's still a lot of work to be done to get the word on that, because when I tell people about that, they're like, oh, I didn't even know about that.
Yeah.
It's kind of that hidden gem, even though it's been around for a while. But what a fantastic event, and a great partnership with College of Humanities and Social Sciences as well. I mean, it was just a really fantastic all-day event.
And I feel like after you experienced that event and then you were at different recruitment opportunities, you saw that there was another talking point that,
Absolutely.
again, had
Yeah.
nothing to do with curriculum or, programs,
Yeah.
but was just, well, let me also tell you about these opportunities on our campus for you to engage in your own culture,
Yeah.
or maybe a completely different culture, to learn about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think on top of that, if I can add, one of the great things about SUMA is accessibility. And hopefully our messaging, and if we need to do a better job with this, we absolutely can do that, but where everybody is welcome, accessibility and inclusivity. And by that I mean everyone. We want everyone to step foot in here. You had mentioned earlier a little bit about being in rural southern Utah, and maybe somebody has not stepped foot into a museum before, and it can look a little intimidating. This beautiful building, it's white and polished, and so it's quiet. It can be a little formal.
It
maybe.
replaced their dentist office.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I would assert that we want, come in your overhauls, come in your boots. It doesn't matter. I think that we want families, we want groups, we want our underserved populations. We want our Native American groups to come here, and we want to partner with them as well. We want to tell and perpetuate the regional identity and storytelling of our area, right? The unique cultures that are here, the natural heritage of the region that's here, in this case, specifically Southern Utah. All of that strengthens our connections to our community and to the people that matter so much to the community that we know and love. So I think that's a really unique, situation that SUMA is in, partnerships, collaborations, things of that nature to, show ownership, and that the individuals in the community have ownership through the museum as well.
Yeah, I think that's kind of at the core of SUMA, and more specifically in my role overseeing the marketing department and social media. These are kind of the conversations that we're always having, is how can we, even in this digital space or in marketing and telling people about the museum and what we're offering, how can we make sure that it's accessible, approachable, that the photos we're using reflect the museum experience you can have, and that there's different people, and you don't have to be dressed up. I think we were joking in one of our past social media meetings about posting a photo of someone wearing like their pajamas, and I can't quite remember like the conversation or the pitch, and I was like, actually that's a good idea. Like, we should post something that says like, you are welcome here, come as you are, as you're comfortable, kind of like what
But I think you've done a really good job of shifting, like when it comes to creative services and like trying to capture these moments and using photo and video to relay that message. That you look at our social media and it is about people engaging with the museum. It's not just presenting the museum as a mausoleum to objects,
right.
that you look through social media or even photos on our website, in brochures, things like that, and you are seeing people engage with the museum or engage with objects. And I think that that's been an important shift for SUMA to make.
Yeah,
so that, again, people feel like they can see themselves here, right?
Yeah, that's kind of at the core of what that is. And like I said, hopefully we'll have another podcast episode that dives into this new brand deeper, but to be able to look at kind of what we've done and then define out, like, we want this place to be a place that's reflective, solo. We want it to be a place where you can engage in dialogues. Maybe the photo has 2 or 3 people talking in it. And we also want it to be a place for creativity, exploration. You can come to a program and learn a new art form or things like that. And I think that's been really helpful kind of in us achieving this approachability, accessibility through our marketing efforts.
Yeah. And I think, again, that we want people to see that on social media and then walk through the door and have that experience. So I think, like our learning and engagement team that's worked with curatorial on either these response activities like we see in Salt Lines or our gallery backpacks, things like that. I mean, I know for me personally, I've always thought, why wouldn't you bring a child to an art museum until 2 years ago when I took my nephew to the Fort Wayne Art Museum in Indiana. And it was my first time being an adult with a child in tow. And I couldn't believe how many times I had to tell him not to touch. So I was desperately looking for where is a space where he can engage and it's activated. And I feel like, again, we do have those programs and we have those resources. So if you just come on a random day and time, you've got a backpack that you can check out and have those hands-on things. Awesome. So yeah, I think, again, wanting to send that message visually through social media and website, but also that we really want to back that up when the visitor steps in the door. And I think programming has been so important to get people through the door, that it's not Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. It's an art museum. So that I don't think would ever be the case. But I think by programming and activating spaces, you're able to get people in the door and to see that they do have that sense of belonging and there's something that they can get out of an experience that engages with works of art.
Yeah, and if I can add just one last kind of thought to that, as I've been here for the last 6 or 7 months, I've spent a good bit of time in the region hiking outdoors. And one of the other things that I think is really unique about SUU being University of the Parks and our proximity to some of the most beautiful landscapes in the country and arguably on the planet. Uniquely, I've met a lot of really wonderful people from all over the globe, hiking just 20 minutes from here, or if I'm, say, downtown at the pub or Central Pizza, I overhear conversations from servers and from visitors in Netherlands, Germany, Japan, Australia. Yeah. I mean, I could go on and on and on just in 6 months of international visitors to Cedar City and Iron County and southern Utah. Now, what drew them here was maybe Zion National Park or a bucket list, but also people come for a Utah Shakespeare Festival. And when you drive up I-15 and you get to Iron County and you see the welcome sign that says "Welcome to Cedar City," it has Utah Shakespeare Festival on it and Southern Utah Museum of Art on it. So the local community cares about that, but also connecting global visitors, having SUMA as a destination stop for them, I think is really important. So I tell people about it all the time, sing praises of SUMA. And I've had people come here and they're like, "Oh, that was really awesome. I didn't know, but now I do." And so they might come for a mountain hike or a Shakespeare play, but SUMA also needs to be on that destination bucket list too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we just found out earlier this week or last week, looking at our attendance data from 2024, that we had visitors from all 50 states
Nice.
and from 6 continents. So
yeah,
that's incredible. That's not surprising at all.
And I think 24 was the first time we had visitors from all 50 states.
Yeah. There's usually 1 or 2 missing.
Yeah. So yeah, it is interesting to look at, and again, those comparisons of Iron County visitors versus out of area visitors and first time visitors versus repeat visitors. We do track all of those things so that we have a good sense of who's coming in the door and who are we reaching, what's working. But I think in addition to thinking about global visitors, and people coming from around the globe, I think that part of it is, that is our vision. I think our vision is for SUMA to not just be an added attraction, for SUMA to become this cultural and educational destination that maybe has is up there sort of with the Utah Shakespeare Festival.
Yeah.
That people specifically look and see what's going to be at the museum, and I'm going to come back, to Cedar City outside of the Shakespeare Festival because of some exhibition happening in the fall, or So I think that is a big part of our vision, and I think part of that is, again, going back to Jimmy Jones and why he even approached SUU about having an art museum on campus. But I think it all comes down to really wanting to bring these global perspectives to a local community and connecting these global issues with local issues. I think Salt Lines does a really good job of that we have, artists who are based in the UK, and they've done projects with the Art Institute of Chicago, and now they're working with the Tate Museum in London, and
cool.
and their work is right here in Cedar City.
Yeah.
But not just that, it's connected to an artist who is based in Salt Lake. That, again, we want to draw these parallels between what's happening globally with what's happening locally. And I think that that's one reason why, contemporary art isn't everyone's cup of tea. But I think what makes it really interesting is that there's often multiple entry points into contemporary art. And also then you're able to really examine contemporary issues. And sometimes those are really challenging to talk about. And we live in a world where things are increasingly politicized. But I think the visual arts give that spark and that entrance into creating a really healthy dialogue and conversation around these things that maybe isn't so on the nose, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that, again, if we can continue to work toward that vision, hopefully we will see SUMA more as a destination and not just an attraction.
Yeah, or an add-on.
Yeah. And the others will see us that way. The university, the tourism for our county, that others will see and want to support what we're doing because of the potential to bring in outside audiences.
Well, any way you cut it, it's SUMA is an incredible gem for the community and for Utah, and it's an asset to the institution for sure. I mean, it just has incredible history over the course of now almost 10 years, coming up on the 10-year anniversary, but also a lot of really great potential moving forward.
Thanks. I think this has been a great conversation about SUMA specifically, academic museums, the roles on a campus and in community. So is there any kind of last things you want to add or say?
Well, Jessica's thinking. I'll start us off. I would just say, first of all, thank you for having me on the program today. It's been a real pleasure and an honor. It's been great to serve as the new dean of the College of Performing and Visual Arts at Southern Utah University. It's just a real treat. I would say to everyone out there that might be listening or clicking on the website that find a way to get here. Just, get over here, see this beautiful space, see what's happening in the museum. If you have kids, bring your kids. It's a great place to bring them. Just find a way to interact and engage with this gem that is Southern Utah Museum of Art.
Yeah, and I think for me, just again, sort of turning to the future, that I feel like as we start to develop our second strategic plan for the museum, that there's a lot of opportunity for really strengthening these connections between campus and community. But again, back to helping our faculty, our staff, our students feel a sense of belonging, feel a sense of community within a community. And yeah, I think that the future is really bright for SUMA, and I really am appreciative of Michael's leadership. It's been a great, 6.5 months. And just really, anytime you have a change like that, it just brings new perspectives and new ideas, and it just looks different, and it's an exciting time for the museum. I think especially solidifying our position within academic affairs as our reporting structure. It's just been yeah, really, really positive and really productive. And I think that the future is bright.
All right. Well, thank you both for being here today.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Emily. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of SUMA Observations and Conversations. We hope you're inspired to visit your nearest campus museum and take advantage of the opportunities they offer. If you're near Cedar City, we hope you'll come visit us soon. Keep having your own observations and conversations, and I'll see you next time. This podcast is edited and produced by Julia Dixon with support from Alec Nelson.